Greetings, friends. Welcome back to Speaking History, where we dive deep into the untold, shocking, and often scandalous events that shaped the world. Today, we're exploring the top 10 political scandals that rocked governments, ruined careers, and left a permanent stain on political history. From hidden affairs and power abuses to criminal conspiracies, these scandals reveal the darker side of politics that many would prefer to forget. Let's unravel these explosive stories and see just how far the powerful will go to protect themselves. Let's dive deeper into the Moshe Katsav Rape Scandal, a story that shocked Israel and the world. Moshe Katsav, who served as Israel's president from 2000 to 2007, was once seen as a respectable leader. But behind the scenes, a much darker story was brewing, one that would unravel the political fabric of the nation. It all began in 2006, when Katsav approached the Attorney General with an unusual complaint. He claimed that a female employee was trying to blackmail him. This unexpected move quickly backfired, as the woman he accused, known in the press as A, turned around and accused him of sexual harassment. This was only the beginning of a nightmare for Katsav, as soon after, several more women, all former employees of the president, came forward with similar accusations. What was once a trickle of allegations turned into a flood. These women described Katsav as a man who misused his power, engaging in sexual misconduct and harassment over the years. The most serious accusations came from one woman, who claimed that Katsav had raped her during his time as Minister of Tourism, well before he became president. By this time, the public and media were in an uproar. Katsav maintained his innocence, insisting that the charges were part of a grand conspiracy against him. He refused to step down from the presidency, even though the allegations were damaging not only his reputation, but also the office he held. The pressure, however, was immense. As public trust eroded and the investigation expanded, Katsav eventually agreed to a plea bargain in 2007. The deal would have allowed him to plead guilty to lesser charges of sexual harassment and avoid a trial for the more serious rape charges. But in a stunning turn of events, Katsav rejected the plea deal at the last minute, choosing instead to fight the charges in court. This decision proved to be a grave miscalculation. The trial was brutal, with testimony from multiple women who recounted years of abuse at Katsav's hands. The details were graphic, painting a picture of a man who took advantage of his position to sexually exploit women, believing he was untouchable. In December 2010, the court delivered a historic verdict. Moshe Katsav was found guilty of 2 counts of rape, as well as sexual harassment and obstruction of justice. The court ruled that his actions represented a grave abuse of power, sending a clear signal that even the highest-ranking officials in Israel would not be immune from prosecution. Katsav was sentenced to 7 years in prison, a moment that symbolized the fall of a once powerful figure. He began serving his sentence in December 2011, marking the first time in Israel's history that a president had been convicted of rape. The Moshe Katsav scandal was not just a personal downfall. It exposed the dark side of political power. It sparked a national conversation in Israel about sexual harassment in the workplace, particularly by those in positions of authority. The scandal also empowered many women to come forward with their own stories of abuse, reshaping the discourse around women's rights and justice in the country. Katsav's downfall remains a powerful reminder that no matter how high you rise, justice can still bring you down. His story stands as one of the most disgraceful political scandals in modern history, where abuse of power and personal misconduct converged to create a storm that permanently tainted Israel's political landscape. Bunga Bunga Watergate, the scandal that rocked Italy and Silvio Berlusconi's career. If there's a name synonymous with political scandals in modern history, it's Silvio Berlusconi. A media tycoon, a 3-time Prime Minister of Italy, and a man whose political career was as controversial as it was charismatic. The phrase Bunga Bunga became a permanent part of the world's political lexicon, thanks to Berlusconi's infamous parties that led to one of the biggest scandals Italy has ever seen. The scandal came to light in 2010, although the rumblings of Berlusconi's wild private life had been circulating for years. Bunga Bunga was allegedly a term Berlusconi used to describe the raucous, sex-filled parties he hosted at his luxurious villa in Arcore. These gatherings reportedly featured dozens of young women, some underage, who were paid to attend and engage in sexual acts. The parties were not just exclusive, they were outrageous, filled with alcohol, drugs, and women dressed as nuns or police officers performing stripteases. At the heart of the scandal was an underage girl named Karima El Maroug, better known by her nickname Ruby the Heart Stealer. Ruby was just 17 years old when she began attending Berlusconi's parties. The problem? In Italy, paying for sex with someone under 18 is a crime, and Ruby's presence at these parties turned the story from tabloid gossip into a criminal investigation. Things escalated when Ruby was arrested for theft, and Berlusconi, according to the investigation, personally intervened, calling the police and claiming Ruby was the niece of then-Egyptian President Hosni Mubarak. Berlusconi allegedly requested her release to avoid diplomatic embarrassment, a lie that would become central to the case. This led to charges of abuse of power, as it was clear Berlusconi had used his position to interfere in a legal matter. The scandal broke wide open in 2011, when Berlusconi was officially charged with paying for sex with a minor and abuse of power. The media went into a frenzy, dubbing the affair Bunga Bunga Watergate. Italy, a country used to political scandals, had never seen anything quite like this. The public was torn between outrage and disbelief. How could a sitting prime minister be involved in such debauchery? And more importantly, how had he gotten away with it for so long? Berlusconi's defense was that the parties were merely elegant dinners, and he denied any wrongdoing, claiming that the women who attended were simply guests and entertainers. But the evidence presented in court painted a very different picture. Testimonies from women who attended the parties described scenes of debauchery, where Berlusconi would shower them with gifts, money, and luxury items in exchange for their company. As the trial progressed, it became clear that Berlusconi had not only participated in these wild parties, but had also lied and manipulated law enforcement to cover up his misdeeds. In 2013, Berlusconi was convicted and sentenced to 7 years in prison for paying for sex with an underage prostitute and for abusing his power to cover it up. However, due to the complex legal system in Italy and Berlusconi's age, he never actually went to prison. His sentence was instead reduced to community service, further frustrating those who believed justice had not been fully served. The Bunga Bunga scandal marked the beginning of the end for Berlusconi's political career. While he remained a powerful figure in Italy for years to come, the scandal left a permanent stain on his legacy. His lavish lifestyle, already a point of contention, became the subject of mockery and criticism worldwide. It wasn't just about the sex parties. It was about the abuse of power, the manipulation of the legal system, and the sheer arrogance of a man who thought he was untouchable. Despite the conviction, Berlusconi's loyal supporters continued to back him, seeing him as a victim of political persecution. He even attempted a political comeback several times, though his influence had waned considerably in the wake of the scandal. The Bunga Bunga Watergate is more than just a sordid tale of sex and power. It's a reflection of the deep-rooted corruption and moral decay that can occur when leaders believe they are above the law. It's a story of excess, exploitation, and the dangerous allure of absolute power. For Italy and the world, it remains one of the most jaw-dropping political scandals of modern times. The Chen Shui-bian Scandals, a fall from grace in Taiwan's political history. Chen Shui-bian's political rise was nothing short of remarkable. From humble beginnings as a lawyer and a fierce advocate for Taiwan's independence, he went on to become the president of Taiwan from 2000 to 2008. However, his legacy would be tarnished by a series of scandals that not only rocked Taiwan, but also highlighted deep divisions within the nation's political landscape. Chen, a member of the Democratic Progressive Party, DPP, was Taiwan's first president from outside the long-dominant Kuomintang, KMT party. He came into power with promises of reform, anti-corruption, and progress, winning the hearts of many Taiwanese citizens who wanted a change. But by the time he left office, his administration had been plagued by corruption allegations, greed, and mismanagement, leading to one of the biggest political scandals in Taiwan's modern history. The Chen Shui-bian Scandals primarily revolved around accusations of corruption, money laundering, and embezzlement. The first hints of trouble began surfacing during his second term in office. In 2006, prosecutors started investigating claims that Chen had misused a special state affairs fund intended for secret diplomatic missions and classified activities. The fund, which had little oversight, was supposedly being used for personal expenses by Chen and his family. The situation worsened when his wife, Wu Shu-jian, was also implicated in the scandal. Wu was accused of accepting millions of dollars in bribes from construction companies in exchange for influencing government contracts. What was particularly scandalous was the accusation that she had used fake receipts to embezzle money from the government, a shocking allegation considering her position as the First Lady. As the investigation unfolded, it became clear that the Chen family had been involved in far more than just the misuse of government funds. In 2008, after Chen had left office, the scandal erupted into a full-blown crisis. Prosecutors discovered that Chen Shui-bian, his wife, and their children had secretly moved millions of dollars into overseas bank accounts. These funds were allegedly obtained through bribes and kickbacks from various business deals and government projects during his presidency. Chen initially claimed that the money was campaign funds and that he had done nothing wrong, asserting that the accusations were politically motivated. However, as evidence mounted, including testimonies from key figures and financial records, it became increasingly clear that corruption was rampant within his administration. In November 2008, Chen Shui-bian was arrested, marking the first time a former president of Taiwan was put behind bars. The charges against him included embezzlement, money laundering, forgery, and bribery. His wife, Wu Shu-jian, was also indicted on similar charges. The case garnered widespread attention, not only in Taiwan but internationally, as it involved millions of dollars stashed away in Swiss bank accounts and other foreign financial institutions. During the trial, Chen denied all the charges and accused the Kuomintang, KMT, Taiwan's ruling party at the time, of orchestrating a political witch hunt to destroy his reputation. Despite his claims of innocence, the court found him guilty of several charges in 2009. He was sentenced to life in prison, later reduced to 20 years on appeal. His wife received a similar sentence, but was unable to serve due to her health conditions. Chen's conviction sent shockwaves through Taiwan's political system. Many of his supporters were devastated, as Chen had been a symbol of hope for Taiwanese independence and democracy. They argued that the prosecution was politically motivated, citing Taiwan's complex political environment where tensions between pro-China and pro-independence factions often lead to fierce rivalries. However, for many others, Chen's fall from grace was a necessary step toward cleaning up Taiwan's government and holding leaders accountable for their actions. One of the most damaging aspects of the scandal was the betrayal felt by the Taiwanese public. Chen Shui-bian had campaigned on a platform of honesty and transparency, promising to rid the government of corruption that had been rampant during the previous KMT regimes. Instead, he and his family became deeply entangled in the very practices he had once condemned. The Chen Shui-bian scandals not only disillusioned many of his supporters, but also weakened the Democratic Progressive Party, which had already been struggling with internal divisions. The scandals significantly impacted Taiwan's political landscape, strengthening the KMT's position in subsequent elections and causing rifts within the DPP that would take years to heal. Even after being convicted, Chen remained a controversial figure. In 2015, after serving 6 years in prison, he was released on medical parole due to his deteriorating health. Despite his release, the scandal has left a deep scar on his legacy. What was once a story of triumph and hope for a more democratic Taiwan became a cautionary tale about the dangers of unchecked power and greed. Chen Shui-bian's rise and fall is a dramatic chapter in Taiwan's history, reflecting the complexities of politics in a young democracy still finding its way. His story remains a potent reminder that no leader, no matter how promising or charismatic, is immune to corruption, and that the public's trust is a precious and fragile thing. The Keating Five Scandal. When senators got too close to a banking crisis. In the late 1980s, the United States was shaken by a major political scandal that exposed the dark intersection of politics, money, and corruption, the Keating Five Scandal. This scandal involved 5 U.S. senators, all of whom were accused of improperly intervening on behalf of Charles H. Keating, Jr., a wealthy businessman and key figure in one of the largest financial disasters in American history, the savings and loan crisis. The savings and loan industry in the United States began to collapse in the 1980s due to a combination of poor regulation, risky investments, and deregulation. Savings and loan institutions, S&Ls, were originally designed to provide low-interest loans for homebuyers, but with deregulation, they began making riskier investments. By the mid-1980s, hundreds of S&Ls were failing, threatening to ruin the savings of millions of Americans. One of the most prominent failures was Lincoln Savings and Loan, which was owned by Charles Keating. By the time Lincoln Savings collapsed in 1989, it had cost taxpayers over $3 billion, and around 23,000 customers, many of them elderly, lost their life savings after buying junk bonds from Lincoln. Charles Keating was a wealthy and influential figure who had deep connections with several politicians. Over the years, he had contributed significant amounts of money to the political campaigns of 5 senators: John McCain, Republican, Arizona; Alan Cranston, Democrat, California; Dennis DeConcini, Democrat, Arizona; John Glenn, Democrat, Ohio; Donald Regal, Democrat, Michigan. Collectively, these senators had received over $1.3 million from Keating and his associates. Keating was generous in his contributions and often provided perks like free trips on his company's private jets and lavish vacations. As his influence over the senators grew, he expected favors in return. In 1987, as regulators were growing concerned about the risky investments being made by Lincoln Savings, Charles Keating decided to call in his political favors. He reached out to the 5 senators who had benefited from his financial generosity, asking them to intervene on his behalf. Specifically, Keating wanted the senators to pressure federal regulators at the Federal Home Loan Bank Board to ease up on their investigation of Lincoln Savings. In April 1987, all 5 senators met with Edwin Gray, the chairman of the Federal Home Loan Bank Board, and other regulators. The senators lobbied hard for Keating, urging regulators to give Lincoln Savings more leeway and essentially questioning whether the investigation into the institution was necessary. Although the regulators initially hesitated to act against Lincoln, the institution was so unstable that it eventually collapsed in 1989, leading to massive financial losses for both taxpayers and individual investors. The collapse of Lincoln Savings revealed the depths of corruption within the savings and loan industry, and the media quickly focused on the role played by the 5 senators. The Office of Government Ethics launched an investigation, and the term Keating Five became synonymous with political scandal. The Keating Five were accused of using their political power to protect Keating from scrutiny in exchange for his financial contributions. The Senate Ethics Committee began hearings in 1990 to determine whether the senators had violated ethics rules. Each of the 5 senators had different degrees of involvement. John McCain and John Glenn were considered to have had the least direct involvement and were ultimately criticized for showing poor judgment rather than outright corruption. However, the remaining 3 senators, Alan Cranston, Dennis DeConcini, and Donald Regal, were found to have acted improperly by exerting inappropriate influence on behalf of Keating. Alan Cranston, in particular, was singled out for the most severe criticism. He had accepted $850,000 from Keating for voter registration groups, an amount far greater than what the others had received. The Ethics Committee reprimanded him, and the scandal effectively ended his political career. The Keating Five Scandal was one of the major political embarrassments of the late 1980s and early 1990s. Although none of the senators faced criminal charges, the public outrage was intense. It became a symbol of the corrupting influence of money in politics, as well as the failure of regulatory oversight in the savings and loan industry. John McCain, though found guilty of poor judgment, managed to salvage his political career. He used the experience as a turning point, becoming an outspoken advocate for campaign finance reform in the years that followed. His involvement in the scandal was a key moment in shaping his political persona as a reformer who would later champion the McCain-Feingold Act, which aimed to limit the influence of money in political campaigns. The other senators were not as fortunate. Alan Cranston decided not to seek re-election in 1992 and retired from public life. Dennis DeConcini and Donald Regal both saw their reputations tarnished, and neither served much longer in the Senate. Charles Keating, the man at the center of it all, was convicted of fraud and sentenced to prison. Although his conviction was later overturned, he spent several years behind bars. His reputation never recovered, and he remains one of the most notorious figures in the savings and loan crisis. The Iran-Contra Affair, a secret deal that shook American politics. The Iran-Contra Affair is one of the most notorious political scandals in U.S. history, involving secret arms sales, covert funding of rebel forces, and a serious breach of public trust during the Reagan administration in the 1980s. The scandal centered around 2 main issues: selling weapons to Iran and using the profits to fund Contra rebels in Nicaragua, both of which were illegal under U.S. law at the time. In the early 1980s, the U.S. was involved in 2 major international conflicts. First, the Reagan administration was determined to support the Contras, a rebel group fighting against the Sandinista government in Nicaragua, which the U.S. viewed as communist-leaning. However, Congress passed the Boland Amendment in 1984, prohibiting U.S. assistance to the Contras. Despite this, the Reagan administration wanted to continue its support. At the same time, the U.S. was facing a complex situation in the Middle East. Iran and Iraq were engaged in a brutal war, and the U.S. had a policy of not negotiating with terrorists or selling arms to Iran, which was designated a state sponsor of terrorism. However, there were hostages being held by Hezbollah, an Iranian-backed group, and some in the U.S. government believed selling arms to Iran could help secure the release of these hostages. In 1985, senior officials in the Reagan administration, including National Security Advisor Robert McFarlane and his successor John Poindexter, came up with a controversial plan. They would secretly sell arms to Iran in exchange for help in freeing American hostages. This not only violated the U.S. arms embargo against Iran, but also went against the Reagan administration's public stance of not negotiating with terrorists. The plan went further. The money from the arms sales, about $30 million, was secretly diverted to fund the Contra rebels in Nicaragua. This was done without the approval of Congress, in direct violation of the Boland Amendment. Lieutenant Colonel Oliver North, a National Security Council staffer, became a central figure in coordinating these operations. He oversaw the logistics of funneling money from the Iran arms sales to the Contras, and played a key role in the cover-up that would eventually come to light. In 1986, a Lebanese newspaper broke the story about the arms sales to Iran, and shortly after, the illegal diversion of funds to the Contras was uncovered. The revelation stunned the American public and triggered a political firestorm. President Reagan initially denied any knowledge of the arms sales, but it soon became clear that senior members of his administration were involved. Investigations were launched by both Congress and a special prosecutor. Televised hearings revealed the extent of the illegal activities, with Oliver North famously testifying in uniform, admitting his role, but claiming he was acting out of patriotism. The Iran-Contra Affair resulted in 14 Reagan administration officials being indicted, with 11 convicted, including Oliver North, Robert McFarlane, and John Poindexter. North's convictions were later overturned on appeal due to immunity granted during his congressional testimony, and President George H.W. Bush pardoned many others involved in the scandal. Reagan, for his part, maintained that he did not know about the diversion of funds to the Contras. However, his reputation took a hit, and many viewed the scandal as a major failure in his administration's oversight. Despite this, Reagan finished his presidency with relatively high approval ratings. The Wilbur Mills Scandal. When politics and a dancer took center stage. The Wilbur Mills Scandal of 1974 is a classic tale of political power, public embarrassment, and personal downfall. Mills was one of the most influential politicians in Washington, serving as the powerful chairman of the House Ways and Means Committee, responsible for overseeing tax laws and Social Security legislation. His career took a dramatic and public nosedive when a bizarre late-night incident exposed his affair with a stripper, severely damaging his reputation. Wilbur Mills was a Democratic congressman from Arkansas who served in the U.S. House of Representatives for over 30 years. As chairman of the Ways and Means Committee, he was one of the most powerful figures in Congress, often referred to as Mr. Social Security for his role in shaping the program. Mills had a reputation for being a brilliant, hard-working lawmaker, but behind the scenes, he struggled with alcoholism. The scandal broke in October 1974, when Mills was involved in a highly publicized car accident near the tidal basin in Washington, D.C. Late at night, police found Mills intoxicated in the car with a woman named Annabella Battistella, better known by her stage name, Fan Fox, a famous stripper who was dubbed the Argentine Firecracker. What made the incident even more sensational was that after the car was stopped by police, Fox jumped out of the vehicle and dove into the tidal basin to escape the media frenzy. The spectacle of a top U.S. congressman being linked to a stripper in such a bizarre way quickly made headlines across the country. Initially, Mills dismissed the incident as a personal matter and even managed to win re-election just a few weeks later. However, the scandal refused to die down. Mills made matters worse by showing up drunk at a Boston nightclub where Fan Fox was performing, drawing further media attention. As the scandal grew, Mills's reputation as a responsible and serious lawmaker was destroyed. Under mounting pressure, he was forced to resign as chairman of the Ways and Means Committee in December 1974, marking the end of his political career. Though he finished his term, he chose not to seek re-election in 1976. Wilbur Mills later admitted to his struggles with alcoholism and sought treatment. His fall from grace was swift, going from one of the most respected lawmakers in Congress to a disgraced politician whose personal choices overshadowed his lengthy career. The scandal also highlighted the risks that come with the intense media scrutiny faced by public officials. Fan Fox, for her part, capitalized on the publicity, appearing in movies and TV shows before eventually leaving the spotlight. Mills's story remains a cautionary tale about the dangers of personal misconduct in the public eye, proving that even the most powerful politicians are not immune to scandal. The Watergate Scandal, a political crisis that shook America. The Watergate Scandal, which erupted in the early 1970s, is one of the most significant and well-known political scandals in U.S. history. It involved a complex web of illegal activities, abuse of power, and cover-ups that ultimately led to the resignation of President Richard Nixon and reshaped American politics. The scandal began on June 17, 1972, when 5 men were arrested for breaking into the Democratic National Committee (DNC) headquarters, located in the Watergate office complex in Washington, D.C. The burglars were found to be wiretapping phones and stealing documents. Initially, it seemed like a botched burglary with no wider implications. As investigations began, it emerged that the burglars had connections to the Nixon administration. It was revealed that they were part of a larger operation aimed at spying on the Democratic Party and sabotaging the opposition's campaign efforts. The administration's involvement was evident, and it became clear that there had been a deliberate attempt to cover up the scandal. President Nixon and his aides were implicated in orchestrating the cover-up, which involved paying hush money to the burglars and using the FBI to obstruct the investigation. Nixon's efforts to shield himself and his administration included attempting to manipulate the media and legal processes. The investigation into the Watergate break-in was led by the Washington Post reporters Bob Woodward and Carl Bernstein, who uncovered numerous links between the break-in and the Nixon administration. Their investigative reporting played a crucial role in bringing the scandal to light. In 1973, a Senate committee, chaired by Sam Ervin, began televised hearings to investigate the Watergate scandal. The hearings were dramatic and widely followed, revealing startling details about the extent of the cover-up and the abuse of power within the Nixon administration. A pivotal moment in the Watergate scandal was the revelation of secret White House recordings. It was discovered that Nixon had installed a taping system in the Oval Office, recording conversations and meetings. These tapes became crucial evidence in the investigation. The most damning tape, known as the smoking gun tape, revealed Nixon's involvement in the cover-up and his attempts to obstruct justice. Facing mounting pressure and imminent impeachment, Nixon decided to resign from the presidency on August 8, 1974. He became the first U.S. president to resign in history. In his resignation speech, Nixon claimed he was stepping down for the good of the country, but his departure did little to quell the damage done to the presidency and the trust in government. Nixon's resignation led to his vice president, Gerald Ford, assuming the presidency. Ford granted Nixon a full pardon shortly after taking office, which was highly controversial and further eroded public trust in government. The Watergate scandal had far-reaching consequences, including increased skepticism of political leaders and calls for greater transparency and accountability in government. The Chappaquiddick Incident, a tragic chapter in American politics. The Chappaquiddick Incident, which occurred in 1969, is a significant and tragic event in American political history involving U.S. Senator Edward Ted Kennedy, the youngest of the Kennedy brothers. The incident had a profound impact on Kennedy's career and is remembered for its complex mix of personal tragedy and political controversy. On July 18, 1969, Ted Kennedy was driving a car with Mary Jo Kopechne, a 28-year-old former campaign worker for his late brother, Robert Kennedy. They were returning from a party at a family friend's home on Chappaquiddick Island, a small island near Martha's Vineyard in Massachusetts. Kennedy's car went off a bridge and plunged into a tidal channel. Kennedy managed to escape the sinking car, but Kopechne was trapped inside and drowned. Kennedy did not immediately report the accident to the authorities. Instead, he returned to his hotel, waited several hours, and then reported the incident to the police the next morning. The delay in reporting the accident and the circumstances surrounding it became central to the controversy. The investigation into the Chappaquiddick incident revealed several troubling details. Kennedy claimed he was disoriented and panicked after the accident, which led him to delay reporting it. However, the circumstances raised questions about his actions and motives. Kennedy's delay in reporting the accident, combined with the fact that he was found to be under the influence of alcohol, led to allegations of negligence and attempts to cover up the incident. The investigation concluded that Kennedy had been driving erratically and had failed to take appropriate action following the accident. Ted Kennedy was charged with leaving the scene of an accident and received a 2-month suspended jail sentence. The incident and its aftermath had a lasting impact on Kennedy's political career. Though he remained a prominent and influential figure in the Senate, the Chappaquiddick Incident cast a long shadow over his public image. The scandal damaged Kennedy's presidential ambitions. He had been seen as a potential candidate for the presidency, but the controversy surrounding Chappaquiddick diminished his prospects. The incident became a focal point for his critics and was frequently cited in discussions about his political legacy. The Profumo Affair, a scandal that shook British politics. The Profumo Affair of 1963 is one of the most notorious scandals in British political history, involving high-profile figures and a dramatic mix of sex, lies, and political intrigue. It centered around John Profumo, the British Secretary of State for War, and a young woman named Christine Keeler. John Profumo was a prominent conservative politician who served as Secretary of State for War under Prime Minister Harold Macmillan. His career was on the rise, and he was considered a key figure in the conservative government. Christine Keeler was a 19-year-old model and showgirl who, unbeknownst to many, was involved in a complex web of relationships with influential men. The scandal erupted in 1963 when it was revealed that Profumo had been involved in an extramarital affair with Christine Keeler. What made the affair particularly explosive was the fact that Keeler was also involved with a Soviet naval attaché, Yevgeny Ivanov. This raised serious concerns about national security, given the Cold War context and Profumo's position in the government. The affair began when Profumo met Keeler at a party hosted by osteopath Stephen Ward, who was also implicated in the scandal. Profumo's relationship with Keeler became a source of public gossip and scandal, but it was the potential security implications that made the affair a major issue. Initially, Profumo denied any wrongdoing, claiming that he had only met Keeler briefly and that there was no affair. However, as journalists and investigators dug deeper, it became clear that his statements were false. The truth emerged that Profumo had indeed been involved with Keeler and had lied to the public and the House of Commons about the nature of their relationship. The cover-up efforts included attempts to discredit Keeler and Ward, but as more evidence came to light, Profumo's position became untenable. The scandal was further fueled by sensational press coverage, which exposed the extent of the affair and its implications. In March 1963, Profumo admitted to lying to the House of Commons and resigned from his position as Secretary of State for War. His resignation was a significant blow to the conservative government, contributing to its eventual downfall. The scandal also had severe repercussions for other individuals involved. Stephen Ward was charged with living off immoral earnings and was found guilty. He committed suicide before his trial ended. The Profumo affair significantly damaged the public's trust in the conservative government and contributed to the Labour Party's victory in the 1964 general election. The scandal is remembered as a classic example of political corruption and the consequences of personal misconduct in public life. The Teapot Dome Scandal, a landmark in American political corruption. The Teapot Dome Scandal, which came to light in the early 1920s, is one of the most significant political scandals in U.S. history. It involved bribery, corruption, and the abuse of power during the administration of President Warren G. Harding. In the 1920s, President Warren G. Harding appointed Albert B. Fall as Secretary of the Interior. Harding's administration was marked by widespread political patronage and corruption. Fall, who had previously been a U.S. Senator from New Mexico, was given control over the leasing of federal oil reserves, including the Teapot Dome Reserve in Wyoming and other locations in California. The scandal began when it was revealed that Fall had secretly leased the rights to drill for oil on the Teapot Dome Reserve and other federal lands to private oil companies. These leases were awarded without competitive bidding and were highly irregular. In return, Fall received bribes totaling more than $300,000 from the oil companies, a significant sum at the time. The scandal gained national attention when Senator Thomas J. Walsh of Montana began an investigation into the leases. The investigation revealed the extent of the corruption and led to a series of hearings that exposed Fall's actions and the underhanded dealings involved. The Senate hearings into the Teapot Dome scandal were highly publicized and revealed the depth of corruption within the Harding administration. The investigation showed that Fall had used his position to secure favorable deals for the oil companies in exchange for bribes. The scandal implicated several other officials and raised serious questions about the integrity of the Harding administration. In 1929, Fall was convicted of bribery and conspiracy, becoming the first former U.S. cabinet member to be sentenced to prison. He was sentenced to a year in prison and fined $100,000. The scandal also led to increased scrutiny of government officials and highlighted the need for greater transparency and oversight in federal dealings. The Teapot Dome scandal had significant repercussions for American politics. It exposed the potential for corruption in government and led to reforms aimed at preventing similar abuses of power in the future. The scandal also tarnished the legacy of President Harding, who died before the full extent of the scandal was known. Harding's administration is often remembered for its scandals and corruption. And that's a wrap on our journey through the top 10 political scandals. We've uncovered some of the most jaw-dropping and controversial moments in history, revealing the complexities and consequences of political misconduct. If you enjoyed diving into these dramatic tales with us, make sure to hit that like button, share this video with friends, and subscribe to Speaking History for more intriguing content. We'd love to hear your thoughts on these scandals or any suggestions for future videos. Drop your comments below. Until next time, keep exploring the past and questioning the present.